We're right with you. The Morning Majority, 5 to 9 on 630 WMAL.
6:37 on WMAL. Good Wednesday morning to you. Brian Neiman, Tony Blankley in the house this morning.
Good morning.
Jim Pethokoukis joins us now of Reuters, who we talk to on a regular basis about the economy, and he has an interesting article. You had an interesting article out the other day, Jim, and the slug of the article was Obama's $2 trillion stealth tax hike. Can you explain to me what that is?
Well, listen, this budget speech he gave last week was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Most budget experts were left scratching their heads because, he gave really no details. He threw out numbers, he threw out goals. The White House then put out this fact sheet, which was just a loose collection of goals. And if you drill down deep, you find all kinds of weird stuff. Perhaps the biggest being is that he completely underplayed how much of a tax hike he wants. If you listen to his speech, here's what you hear. I'm going to cut debt by $4 trillion. $2 trillion is going to come from spending. $1 trillion is going to come from less interest expense, and $1 trillion is going to come from higher taxes. But once you drill down, you realize that he's hidden another tax increase. There's two huge tax increases there. There's that $1 trillion tax increase, which he says he's going to find by getting rid of all these tax breaks. Plus, don't forget, he also has another $1 trillion tax increase by getting rid, by letting the Bush tax cuts for upper-income Americans expire. So it's really a $2 trillion tax increase. And rather than getting, 25% of his budget, of his debt cuts from taxes, it's really anywhere from 40 to 60%, depending on how you calculate the other numbers. And he completely underplayed that.
Okay. Well, does that mean then the $4 trillion in savings that he says he's going to get is really going to be $6 trillion in savings?
When you look at it, what you would look at it is the savings are more, but taxes are higher. But what you also have to, and I just wrote a long blog post on this, is that, and he doesn't mention this, and it's very difficult to find, is that he assumes much higher economic growth than Paul Ryan does for his plan. In fact, what that economic growth does is really give him an extra $2.2 trillion to play with.
Well, doesn't he also, the assumption that he's going to save $1 trillion in interest, does he, I haven't seen the fine print, does he assume that interest rates on T-bills are not going to go up over the next 10 or 20 years?
No. Actually, and he's like the CBO in this, he assumes two big things, continued low interest rates and very strong economic growth, no recession. If you look at history, since World War II, we've already had some sort of downturn about every 4 or 5 years. This assumes, again, a rosy growth, low interest rates. I mean, listen, that'd be a great scenario if we get it. But he assumes everything that can go right will go right.
One more question on this: why did the president put out his plan for over 12 years instead of the standard 10 years?
No, it's to make his debt cuts look bigger.
Okay.
Because he wanted to have debt cuts somewhere like Paul Ryan's, and what he originally came up with wasn't. So, let's take them out a couple of years. Reporters aren't going to read the fact sheet. They're not going to pay attention. It's really unbelievably disingenuous.
Well, that's the same thing that the administration did with Obamacare, where they had 10 years of revenues but only 6 years of benefits, so they were able to make it at least appear that it did not be as expensive as it will be.
It's a sort of like Enron-like accounting that while it's really sort of commonplace in Washington, D.C., if we're going to start a serious debate on this budget and preventing financial collapse, I think we need to do better than that.
Didn't people go to prison over Enron accounting?
Rules are different down here.
All right, let's get to the real problems. And the president is out. He's doing this town hall meetings throughout the country. He says he's optimistic a deal can be reached. Are you optimistic a deal can be reached, Jim?
I don't think we're going to see. I think we're going to see for the rest of the year. Eventually in July, we'll see a deal on the debt ceiling. There'll be no big deal. There's going to be no grand compromise on budget and spending, and I don't think the S&P debt warning is going to change that. In fact, I think the debt warning is going to make things worse because it's going to encourage Republicans, I think, to play much tougher on the debt ceiling issue, which means it's going to go longer. The debate's going to be more acrimonious, and I think it's going to eat up all the energy and oxygen And I don't think we're going to see any big compromise.
Do you think that a budget will actually get passed this year then?
Oh, so we have the debt ceiling, which is going to probably go out into July,
right?
And then we'll take August off, and they'll come right back and have this huge battle over the 2012 budget, which is probably going to be continuing a resolution. It's going to be very much a replay of what we just had.
But Boehner has said, Speaker Boehner, that he wants to pass individual appropriations, which was the traditional method of doing it. Assuming that he's able to do that in the House, you don't think the Senate will in any way respond? Do you think we'll get pulled to CRs forever anyway?
I think that's a great idea by the Speaker, but as we found out, the Senate is a completely different beast. I have a lot of trouble, and actually it's the same with the debt ceiling, of actually sort of plotting the path to things getting done and not having shutdown threads. To me, it's an extremely murky situation, and I talked to a lot of people on Wall Street who get very worried about this. It's very difficult to get from A to B to C at this point.
All right, Jim. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for reading the back page, as always.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Jim Pethokoukis, Reuters Breakingviews columnist. You can also see him on CNBC from time to time.